You need to leave. It isn't safe here. Go!
One of the most interesting characters from the second season of From has to be Martin. He showed up unexpectedly in the season premiere, and although we see him die soon after, the effects of that meeting affected the entire town at a moment's notice. In the third season, Martin showed up one more time, but this time he spoke with Julie. This got the fans thinking, does Martin have a far more significant role to play than we initially thought? Well, that's what we're going to cover in today's video. Join us as we look into Martin's character and why he was chained in the dungeon. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
We're out of time!
Martin and Boyd's meeting. The first time we saw Martin, Boyd was trapped in the dry well of the dungeon. Boyd called out for help, and it was Martin who answered his cries down there. A rope was thrown down to Boyd, and using that, he climbed outside. Initially, we thought either Martin or some other entity had thrown down the rope to Boyd, but now we know that Julie threw the rope down. When Martin and Boyd spoke in the Season 2 premiere, we learned that Martin could be one of the many people who were trapped in the town after using a faraway tree. Martin said that traveling through the tree was what captured him. As Boyd worked to save Martin, despite the latter's protests, he noticed the United States Marine Corps tattoo on him. This made Boyd feel a deeper sense of camaraderie with Martin, which he used to try to persuade Martin from wanting to be killed. All this time, the music box was playing in the background, and Martin tried to tell Boyd that he needed to escape before the music stopped. However, Boyd paid no attention to his words because he didn't want to leave a fellow Marine behind. Martin's words made it evident that he had been tormented by the music box monster for several years, and the music he heard was a warning that the monster would come soon. But Boyd refused to listen to anything and stayed back until the music stopped playing, hoping to save Martin. That's when Martin cut Boyd's hand and transferred his blood and worms underneath the skin to Boyd. What could have happened to Martin? Although Martin and Boyd did not talk for a long time, there's no denying that their conversation was actually rather informative. We learn that Martin has been trapped in the dungeon for so many years that he's lost count, so he must have been trapped in the town for longer. From his conversation, we can understand that originally, as a member of the town, Martin thought this was the worst part. But after he tried to go through the faraway tree, kind of like Dale, he ended up trapped there. The music box monster infected and enslaved him, keeping him captive ever since. Just like Julie, Mary, and Randall, Martin was presumably held captive with the two others that Boyd finds. Since they were both clearly dead, leaving only Martin shackled up in the dungeon, it certainly raises some eyebrows. Had Martin been in cahoots with the music box monster, explaining why he was still left alive? Could he be looking to get new victims? After all, it was Martin who infected Boyd with the bloodworms. While Martin didn't give us a lot of detail about his experience with the music box monster, whatever we know from Julie and Randall is enough for us to understand that Martin went through tremendous torture at the hands of the entity. He was probably forced to stay alive for as long as he did by the music box monster, as he was the sole source of food for it. Since Boyd wouldn't kill him, Martin forcibly passed on the infection to Boyd, ridding himself of the bond with the monster. That's why, the moment Martin passed on the worms, he passed away. From Martin's comment about Boyd's gun, I think he's been trapped in the dungeon even before Victor was trapped in the town. Martin and Julie's unexpected meeting. I don't think Martin's return to the show was on anyone's bingo card for the third season of From. But here we are. So how did this happen? Well, from what we can understand from the 8th episode, when Julie stepped into the dungeon ruins, she was transported back into the dungeons where she, Randall, and Mary were trapped. Their screams overwhelmed her, and a moment later, the time in the dungeon went backward. When she opened her eyes, she was in front of Martin. She listens to Martin's words and throws a rope down to Boyd before exiting the dungeon. However, by exiting the dungeon, she ends up in the tunnel system where Tabitha and Victor are. The whole thing came to an abrupt stop when Acosta and Kenny carried Julie's body out from the dungeon ruins. Once they moved the body out, Julie came back to her senses. Now, this means that the dungeon is the one that is making Julie travel through time. If that's the case, then Martin could also be trapped in time. That would explain why he knows Julie, Boyd, and even Abby. What does it mean? Now, we know that Martin dies when he meets Boyd, but if we were to travel back in time, he would be able to have a proper conversation with Martin, which I think would help our characters a lot, given that Martin has been trapped in this town for so long. He might just have all the answers that our town folks need to survive and escape the town. I think the music box monster has the ability to manipulate time or travel through time. That's why Martin was stuck in time, aging but not dying. Since Julie, Randall, and Mary survived the run-in with the music box monster, they're the perfect candidates to travel through the dungeon and explore its time-altering abilities. Since Julie managed to travel through time, I think she would continue going further and further back in the past, learning things from Martin and maybe even traveling to the future to learn the outcomes. Overall, I believe Julie would play a huge role in saving the people from the town. Marvelous verdict. Since the show's genre is science fiction and horror, fans have been rather curious about the science fiction part that will be introduced in the show. While the evil pharmaceutical companies and aliens were the top guesses by the fans, they're incredibly excited to see the time travel element introduced into the equation. Now the question is, will From pull off the time travel lore as masterfully as Dark did? Well, we'll just have to wait and find out, won't we? Let us know in the comments what you guys think about Martin and the whole time travel aspect now introduced to the show, and I'll see you guys next time. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.